Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We are starting our webinar on our carbon and coffee report. So without further delays, let's move forward. And thanks again for joining us today. First, let me introduce the webinar. The white paper, Climate Change and Coffee, Acting Globally and Locally, the last of a series of 5 papers republished by the SCA in 2018. In that report, among the recognition of the sheer magnitude and the tangible effects of climate change in coffee production, and of course, the entire value chain, one of the key recommendations emerging was measure and reduce your carbon footprint, highlighting that, and I'm quoting, companies can set an example by taking responsibility for their own contribution to climate change by measuring their carbon footprints throughout the supply chain and implementing a plan to reduce those emissions. As time and the climate crisis has progressed, the SCA continued to note that gaps in our collective knowledge around carbon emissions reporting and reduction remain a significant challenge to companies seeking to create tangible solutions to drive climate actions within their sourcing footprint. This report, Carbon and Coffee, Greenhouse Gas Emissions Reduction, Progress and Strategies Across the Value Chain, that we will be sharing in this webinar today, somehow connect the dots on those aspirations and aims to highlight some of the key tools, strategies, and best practices that coffee industry actors could adopt to implement carbon emission reduction strategies, and encouraging evidence and science-based conversation for evolving our sector-wide mindsets and approaches for positive action on climate change. I want to thank you all for joining us in this panel, in which I'll be hosting a conversation with 5 sustainability leaders to talk about this research report developed by the Chain Collaborative in partnership with the Specialty Coffee Association and the Environmental Science Program at Whittier College. We will discuss with them the meaningful findings in the report and how to apply this research to inform carbon reduction strategies in the coffee industry. My name is Andrés Montenegro, and I'm the Sustainability Director at the SCA. I will be the host for this conversation with the leaders of the research team and 3 coffee importing companies representatives, which are leading amazing and innovative approaches for addressing climate change challenges within their sourcing networks, and that were highlighted in the report. Thanks again for joining us today, and hope you find the conversation inspiring, energizing, and insightful. And just as a quick reminder, this report is available as an open access document in our research library. So without further and additional delays, we will start with a brief introduction of our panelists. Welcome to you all. And if you can please quickly share your name, title, and location, where are you based? That would be great. So let's start with the research team leaders, and then we can follow with the company's representative. If you don't mind, Nora, you can make the honors.
Yes, thank you. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Nora Burkey. I'm the founder and executive director of the Chain Collaborative, and I was one of the research leads on the report and primary support writing and editing as well. And I'm currently calling in from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cinzia Fissore. I'm an associate professor of environmental science at Whittier College, which is located in Southern California, near Los Angeles. And I am one of the co-authors on this report.
Wonderful. Melissa, you want to follow up?
Yes, hi everybody. I am Melissa Wilson. I am Impact Manager for Cooperative Coffees. We are a US and Canada based importer formed by 23 roaster owners. and I am currently located in California. Thank you for having me here.
Pedro.
Andrés and everybody, thank you for having me here. We're happy to be here. My name is Pedro Manga. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for Caravela Coffee. We are a specialty coffee trader with 20 more years of experience engaged in sustainability. And I'm happy to be here and share our learnings and our journey through understanding of environmental impact.
Great. And last but not least, Stephanie.
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Stephanie Alcala. I am a trader and the sustainability liaison for RGC Coffee. We have 3 offices, Los Angeles, Bogota, and Montreal. I'm based in Los Angeles, but this week I'm at our office in Montreal.
Ooh. Thank you, Stephanie. And wonderful, thanks for this presentation. So in order to get into the matter, I'm going to pass the baton to Nora so she can introduce the report. So Nora, please, can you share with us the motivations for the report and your goals for the coffee industry? And in addition, if you can share what were some of the main takeaways?
Yes, of course, thank you. Well, yes, the report took about a year to do the research and complete the writing. And so kind of backing up to, over a year ago, why did we, Cinzia Fissore and I pitched this idea to the Specialty Coffee Association to publish this report. Basically, the idea for me came from this realization that, I think in previous years, we were talking a lot about climate change, and then all of a sudden this word carbon came up more and more. And, I think there's a lot of buzzwords we hear in coffee: sustainability, resilience, and, sustainability. I think a lot of people use that term to mean, different things, right? And the same with resilience. People can kind of apply it to talk about their own programs and how they can approach sustainability differently, perhaps. But carbon to me seemed like something really different and specific because it is so scientific that, I had to understand more specifically, what it was that people were really doing and companies are really doing when they were saying they had an approach to carbon reduction. And so I had the opportunity to work on a carbon project and realized that I would have wanted a report like this prior to that project to really be able to, answer this question for myself, what tools and strategies are companies and organizations within the coffee value chain using or plan to use in order to measure and reduce their carbon and GHG emissions. And so in other words, I wanted to understand, like, what are people doing when they say they're working on carbon? What are all the possibilities of that? So that's really what the report sought to do. And in collaborating with Dr. Fissore, we were able to hire 3 students from Whittier College, and I see 2 of them are on the call today, Allison Liu and Nona Golden. So hi, and thanks for being here. And the 3rd student was Duncan Charbonneau. So they really did an excellent job conducting this research and writing the first draft of the report. So I want to thank them for that. And I'll talk about the key takeaways, but just very briefly mention it was a 4-phase methodology. So first we had a literature review to really kind of understand, like, why is carbon dioxide so dominant in the discourse, and why is there such a discrepancy in data as well? I think people might have heard many different things about where the biggest hotspots are, and sometimes that data is conflicting. So we wanted to understand GHG emission quantification in agriculture generally, but then coffee as well, more specifically. And then we did a desk review of company and organizational work to date. So we reviewed their websites and their documents to understand what they were publicly committing to. And then we conducted a survey as well, and a sort of online anonymous survey where we could ask people more information about their current practices. And then finally, we conducted interviews for more qualitative feedback. So I think, there's a lot of findings and you'll see them in the report, but a couple things maybe to talk about just briefly was the popularity of land-based interventions. So whether through insetting or offsetting, but focusing on things like, reforestation or afforestation, transitions to agroforestry to increase terrestrial carbon sequestration. We found a lack of awareness about how to address transportation emissions. But on the energy side, we did find that there was a focus on transition to renewable energy, with solar being one of the most popular. And then finally, I know we're going to be talking more about sort of the gaps in at the end of the call, but kind of this broader need to share a quantification and accounting methodologies was another huge finding. So I think unless Dr. Fissore has anything to add, I think we can leave that as our introduction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nora. It's always, I know that it's always a challenge to explain in simple terms a complex issue, and I think that you did a great job in providing this initial perspective and framework for our conversation. And you mentioned that a lot of these takeaways from the report resulted from learning about what companies are doing throughout the coffee sector. So we will give them the option to share their perspectives, asking a couple of probing questions to go deeper and hear their perspectives now. So let's start with Melissa. Melissa, good morning. And the report indicated a lack of literature available on small and medium businesses, specific tools and strategies, and the limitation to their engagement. How does Cooperative Coffees measure its own footprint and design climate action for its smaller size member roasters? You could share a little bit about that.
Yes, thank you, Andrés. Like I mentioned earlier, we are a cooperatively owned importer formed by 23 roaster members in the US and Canada. So much like smallholder farmer organizations, we are building scale by coming together and pulling our volumes into something that can really have much more impact than we could individually. We are a values-driven mission-based organization, and our mission is focused on making coffee a viable livelihood for smallholder farmers. So with that, we have a long history of engaging with our supply chain. We also have policies that include going really deep and sharing risk with our suppliers. So we grow volumes with our existing supply partners before looking for other sources of volumes. And then that also means when there have been, for example, climate events like the hurricanes in Central America in 2020, Ida and Iota, we also funded some recovery for organizations who supply us in the region. So even if the product is not available that year because of a catastrophe like that, we are still present and we will be there on the other side. So the most important indicator for us is the length of our relationships for our sustainability. With that, we always survey both our roaster members and our producer supply partners on their biggest needs. And consistently, outside of the big parentheses of COVID, we have found that climate change is the largest challenge facing our supply partners. So we have an impact fund into which all our roaster members put 3 cents per pound they purchase. And we use that to fund producer-led innovative projects around reforestation and best practices in agroforestry and other things. But then we realized that in order to maximize our impact and to really respond to climate change and to really take responsibility for our share of the risk that producers face, we needed to understand what our footprint was. So in 2019, we started measuring our footprint through a carbon calculator that we developed. So our 23 roaster members can include information on their activities, their facilities. And then we also measure all the way from FOB, the footprint of our coffees. So any coffee that they purchase from their cooperative coffees can be calculated in terms of footprinting. And in order to respond to this and understand what we can do in reductions, and as well as taking responsibility for our share of negative impact on the climate faced by producers, we engaged in a partnership with several organizations, Root Capital, Sustainable Food Lab, the Chain Collaborative, and started pursuing a model in order to be able to quantify the value of environmental services provided by the smallholder farmers who supply us, and be able to recognize it by measuring it to put a financial benefit to it as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. I like a lot the tools and approaches that you're implementing, but I would like to ask one additional question to go further into this connection with farmers. Overall responses from the report showed a strong focus across the coffee sector on production-based solutions, while pointing to limitations in access to finance for farmers to implement these best performing environmental services. How does Cooperative Coffees approach this dichotomy and promote this fairer compensation for farmers? If you can elaborate a little bit further, that would be great.
Yes, so we know that farmers are not the driver of climate change. We know that this is mainly the product of industrialized societies' excessive use of fossil fuels. But we also understand that they are the most vulnerable. However, we really believe that they are a key part of the solution, particularly organic farmers who have been practicing agroforestry for a very long time on their land. And these organic smallholder farmers are the same who started the fair trade movement. And why is it important to focus on those two tools as part of the solution? Because conventional farming is incompatible with life on Earth. Agrochemicals disrupt ecosystems and harm human health as well. And I truly believe that you cannot have any kind of sustainability without first making sure that the trade terms are fair and are enabling producers to meet their needs, because the first thing that will be cut when the prices do not meet basic needs are going to be additional investments in taking care of filtering waterways and other practices. So we also find that we need to measure, but the value in that information is what actions can be taken. So if we just reduce the work to accounting in an environment that is lacking regulation over what kind of claims are made, then we are motivated to reward performance based on one indicator that's oversimplifying a very complex dynamic. And we end up with a lot of blind spots. So we might end up perpetuating dynamics of privilege, which in the farmer context might mean just those farmers who are blessed with more land or the better location end up getting more of the benefit, and compound the issues that exist already in those communities. So without broader regulation from governments on trading terms, energy production, non-renewable materials use, deforestation, we think that there is little that individual businesses can do to truly contribute towards a scientific goal of limiting temperature rise. So we believe that businesses of any size can actually have a lot of impact in reducing human suffering resulting from climate change. So we are using the Cool Farm tool to measure the performance of individual practices. And we believe that this is the most valuable aspect of this tool. because then smallholder farmer cooperatives can target their technical assistance investments to build climate resilience. If we are not focused on performance and getting the number as high as possible, we can actually focus on where the highest risk areas are and address those. So by not tying our financial incentives to the sequestration performance, although claims can be made for marketing purposes, we do enable our suppliers to invest in the most vulnerable sectors, whether that is geographically or socially.
Wonderful, thank you, Melissa. I like this approach on root causes, and yeah, unfortunately, we need to move forward because we have a limited amount of time for this webinar and many valuable insights from the other panelists. I know that we need to move with Pedro, but yeah, I don't know if time allows, and if Cinzia, Nora, you can briefly highlight additional insights and connections on the report based on this response from Melissa, that would be great. If not, we can move directly with Pedro.
Yeah, I'll just add, thank you. I'll just add a very brief comment. And as a soil scientist myself, who has dedicated years looking at carbon sequestration, I was really pleased to see from this report that there is such a deep understanding of the role the farmers, especially smallholder farmers, have on the carbon solution, but also on how vulnerable they are to climate change. And I was really pleased to see the deep understanding that actors in the coffee industry have on the role of healthy soils in supporting farmers and in supporting the product itself, because sequestering carbon is just one of the many ecosystem services that we can achieve, but there are many more that really support the livelihood of especially the more vulnerable of growers. And definitely this is an area that we should explore more, and we should really all dedicate time, effort in a more standardized way, if you will, like Melissa was advocating, so that results are real and they can really be distributed across all growers. So for the benefit of all and for the benefit of the industry, really, as a whole. And we can elaborate more later in case we have time. I know we need to move on.
Thank you, Cinzia. Well, let's move with Pedro. And I would like to make the connection because Melissa mentioned the cool farm tool, and I know that you have also used that as part of your effort. And the report states that many companies are focusing on land-based interventions and using this cool farm tool. But there are many challenges with this, of course. How are Caravella results from using this CFT at the farm level, highlighting some of these challenges as well as opportunities, Pedro? Good morning.
Thank you, Andrés. Good morning. Yes, in our journey to understand the environmental impact, we started using the carbon footprint in 2019 in a small pilot project done in Tolima, in Colombia, with around 70 farms. And that allows to start the conversation, especially within the company, and cascading down that knowledge to our education team at field, so that they start understanding how to measure and especially what was the carbon footprint, and start learning how to transfer that knowledge to farmers. Then in 2021, after 2 years of learning about how to better use the tool, how to better gather data, we scale up the initiative to all 7 origins, where we source coffee, 3 in South America and 4 in Central America. And in around 660 farms, we measure the footprint, and the results, they show huge opportunities that are aligned with those challenges that are exposed in the report of Nora and Cinzia. So in the first glance, beyond just assessing the emissions, we also assess the forest inventory and the green assets at the farms. And I think that carbon sequestration, yes, I agree with the panelists that it could be used as a marketing strategy, and it is not the only focus hotspot that we should have at farms, but there is definitely a massive sequestration potential that does calls for the need to re-measuring it or measuring better, and probably redefining the impact of sustainable agricultural practices within growing coffee, since we found out that in countries like Colombia, where coffee is grown almost fully without shade and sun grown and with heavy use of synthetic fertilizers, there is a net emission per kilogram of parchment coffee produced at the farm level. But when you contrast that results to other countries where general practices are tending towards shade-grown coffee and agroforestry practices that are complemented with low usage of synthetic fertilizers and heavy use of organic fertilizers, you can see, or our data shows that there is a sequestration potential per kilogram of carbon produced. This worth a better study, but it does call for action to better monitor this and communicate it, especially nowadays with new EU reports. There's still challenges, and I think challenges with the CoolFarm tool are vertical all over the supply chain, from data gathering, awareness, and initiatives and tools at the farm level, to technical assistant teams, knowledge that could elevate the conversation, and these panels that could bring the whole industry together into facing the challenges and discussing about it, to the awesome work that Cooperative and others are doing with the CoolFarm Alliance in updating and improving how the CoolFarm tool measures the environmental impact at farms.
Wonderful, wonderful, Pedro. I like very much what you share about how to integrate these practices with a different definition of quality, because it resonated in me. This is heavily aligned with our new coffee value assessment systems on the extrinsic attributes that incorporate these sustainability claims. But also I like very much the results that you shared in your carbon report, and these opportunities for overlapping carbon negative approaches in coffee production. But that's part of a different conversation. But I would like to elaborate from there in one additional question for you. How does Caravella integrate both insetting and offsetting strategies, which were mentioned as two parallel approaches in the report, and that I know that you are using as part also of your strategies? I think, Pedro, you're muted. Sorry.
I'm sorry. So Caravella started first measuring and reporting the footprint of its operation around 2016. And since then, the company has been learning on how to better monitor their impact upon the environment, but also looking for ways to mitigate and inset those emissions. So in 2018, Caravella invested in 500 square meters of solar panels to supply energy to our dry mill operation in Colombia, which is our biggest. And that effort in 2018 was complemented with other initiatives along the years, like investing in new machinery that is more energy efficient, replacing old one that wasn't energy efficient, and upgrading the processing protocols that occur in the dry mill operation. That has allowed us in those 4 years to save, we estimate, around 23% of energy, which in 4 years, it worth 1 year of operation for the dry mill of coffee bags being produced with entirely clean energy, sort of speaking. That journey of insetting our footprint and mitigating at the dry mill has been complemented with offsetting efforts that started also in 2018. First, with a partial proportion of our overall footprint, offsetting emissions with projects in Madre de Dios jungle in Peru, but also cloud forest systems in Colombia. And since 2020, we partnered with One Carbon World in the UK. They have been supporting us and getting our measurements to a next level that is aligned with international standards. And since 2020, we have been accredited with carbon neutrality by offsetting our footprint in projects in Uruguay, but also United Nations Climate Development Mechanism projects in India. We, as Cup Coffees, we think that the better we measure the footprint inside, we can better mitigate it. So we have developed a tool that could allow us to measure our footprint per operation and per origin. So in all 11 countries where we operate, we measure the footprint, and that allows us to set targets that are individual for each operation and set initiatives or mitigation initiatives for business traveling, waste management, but also coffee freight, which is most of our footprint.
Wonderful. Congratulations for all these accomplishments, Pedro, and thanks for these additional perspectives. And again, before moving forward with our next panelists, I would like to ask again, Cinzia or Nora, if you would like to highlight additional insights and connections on the report that could be valuable for our audience.
Yeah, I can go ahead and share something. I think what Pedro mentioned in terms of beginning with starting to measure the footprint of the company really was the first step for a majority of respondents, that they felt without knowing, what their carbon footprint was, then they weren't able to build strategy. And I think one other thing I would highlight is just what the report does is also really tries to dive into the complexities of reporting itself, and how if there's not a shared methodology, it's hard to compare across measures and across companies. But as you do measure, you learn basically about the scopes and how what are the emissions that you control that are directly under your control versus those that aren't. And I think that just provides us really kind of greater insight into potentially where where the hotspots can be. And I really appreciate what both Pedro and Melissa have shared, that while we know that that farmers are not the cause of climate change, I think they are. Well, we know they're part of the solution, and I really think it's important to just reiterate that, because there's a sort of this perhaps understanding that the biggest majority of emissions are coming from that scope 3, so they're coming from downstream at the production, upstream at the production side. But I think what the report highlights is part of why we're seeing that is because scope 3 emissions are shared actually, and they're very hard to measure. Yes. And even within the GHG protocol, there's not a lot of standardization on how to measure that. So I just wanted to definitely reiterate and thank both Pedro and Melissa for sharing that as we measure, the goal is that we support farmers the best that we can, rather than saying this is where the emissions are, they're the culprit, right? Because we know that's not the case.
Wonderful. Thanks for those additional insights, Nora. And well, now we will move with our final panelist of the day, Stephanie. Let me ask you, while the researchers heard from a lot of roasters while putting together the report, importers can also play a key role. Why do you think importers are so uniquely positioned to foster sustainability, and in this case in particular, advance carbon initiatives in the coffee sector?
Yes. First, I want to say this webinar thus far has been so inspiring. It's been great to hear about the work that Caravella and Cooperative Coffees is doing. So I've already learned so much. So at the most fundamental level, the role of a green coffee importer is to connect producers to roasters and retailers, and to offer support in mitigating and managing risk. So right there, embedded in our role, is to listen and understand the needs and challenges of both of these parties, and to then find solutions and areas of opportunities. So it's with this insight that we're hearing on a daily, day-to-day operations that I believe importers are really strategically positioned to bring together producers, roasters, and retailers who have the same shared values, same shared interests and commonalities. So we serve as sort of matchmakers in a sense. And so at RGC Coffee, we've been able to use our experiences and expertise as green coffee importers with more than 50 years of experience to establish a sustainability program that we harness our business to support economic development in coffee growing communities. And we do this by developing, implementing, and managing sustainability projects across our supply chains and financing these efforts along with the support of roasters and retailers through green coffee purchases. So we're able to facilitate this impact and to communicate with both producers, roasters, and retailers and share this impact and to approach these solutions holistically and collaboratively. And so in the case of carbon, a couple years ago, we became aware of an opportunity and interest from farmers that we were already working with to measure carbon in the supply chain. And we heard about this through our in-country partner Solidaridad, who is a civil society organization who is mentioned in the report. And they approached us saying that there is an opportunity to modify and adapt the Cool Farm tool to measure carbon in our supply chain. And so we piloted this methodology. It seems like around the same time as Cooperative Coffees was doing the same work. And we were able to then develop this modified adapted version and measure, and now we've measured over 500 farms throughout Colombia. And this opportunity was only came about because we had both boots on the ground, communicating directly with producers and our in-country partners, as well as we were hearing from our roasters and retailer partners the interest and need for them to be starting to report on their carbon emissions in both scope 1, 2, and 3. So our ability to have the ears and to listen to both sides of the supply chain is what allows importers this unique position to facilitate and foster sustainability, and in this case, carbon efforts in the coffee sector. So each stakeholder has the ability to become involved. I'm just advocating that importers are really uniquely positioned to lead this charge.
Wonderful. That's very interesting. What resonates deeply in me, Stephanie, is this interdependence in the supply chain that we evidence in our coffee system map, and how important this could be in terms of leverage point for generating lasting positive impact on climate action. So thanks for those additional insight. Let me ask you one additional questions. What are the challenges and opportunities you face in implementing solutions to mitigate greenhouse gases emissions as RGC, and what do you think is the significance of this report in terms of highlighting these challenges and opportunities to spur and trigger further action?
One of the major challenges that was emphasized in the report is that every supply chain is so unique, not only in the physical processes that transform the coffee, but the physical transportation the coffee takes in its journey throughout the supply chain. And also to remember that supply chains are made up of people, And so therefore, each supply chain is comprised of people whose needs, aspirations, challenges, and circumstances differ. So I think the main challenge in implementing solutions is ensuring that the solutions take this reality into consideration. The opportunities are vast and abundant, but I feel that going back to the Cool Farm tool, this really is such a unique tool that is going to be really beneficial moving forward. Again, the Cool Farm tool is just a way to measure and collect data surrounding carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. But the most significant and noteworthy aspect of this tool is that it's providing us the ability to engage directly with producers and work closely with the communities to collect data. And what we're doing at RGC Coffee is that we have technicians on the ground, but these technicians are training farmers to collect and measure the data for themselves. And so by farmers participating directly in measuring their carbon and greenhouse gas emissions using the Cool Farm tool, through this process, they're able to recognize the concepts, understand, and learn what this entire process means, and for them to really become leaders in sustainability and to understand that how they are managing their land has direct implications and impact in the environment, and their decisions are ultimately affecting the entire industry. So for example, 2 weeks ago, we just had a training with 15 producers and using the Cool Farm tool. And after completing the analysis of the outcome, we were working to develop a 4-year implementation plan. And the producers unanimously decided that they wanted to prioritize the protection and reforestation of farms. And this insight was only gained by the farmers completing the analysis and completing the data collection methodologies themselves. They're realizing the importance of the protection of the environment and how they are really at the forefront of fostering long-lasting change. And the significance of the report really, it highlights the desire of our industry that we really want to take a farmer-first approach. Throughout the entire report, it really emphasized that producers are, again, they find themselves in this point where they are being most affected and yet have the least access to resources. But it's really inspiring to see that everyone in the coffee sector has the same shared vision that we need to be working together collaboratively, directing resources to provide producers the ability to be change makers themselves.
Wonderful. Yeah, fully agree, Stephanie. And thanks for complementing our learning today. I need to be aware of time, but I would like to double check again with Cinzia and Nora, if you would like to provide additional insights on connections on the report, just for wrapping up this section. So if you can help me with that, please feel free.
Just a very quick comment, if it's okay. Well, I appreciate Stephanie's point of view, especially coming from an importer. And I think something that emerged from our report as well is that importers really have a unique approach and a unique position within the industry, and many importers are vertically integrated, meaning that they directly work with growers, farmers, so they really have the pulse of what's going on, and so there's a lot that they can do. And I like the mention that Stephanie made to financial support, which is something that emerged from the report as well, as not only there's a lack of knowledge, but some respondents also lamented the lack of financial support or incentives to adopt assessment tools or implementation tools that can be particularly costly in some cases. Obviously, we're talking also about small companies, not just multinational, big companies that perhaps can absorb easily cost of large-scale assessments, and so this is something that we should all keep in mind, and it's important to make evaluation tools, assessment tools feasible for all if we really want to make substantial changes that include everybody in the coffee industry.
Wonderful. On your side, additional thoughts, Nora? Something did you want to introduce in addition to those coming from Cinzia?
Yes, well, I wanted to add to what Stephanie said as well, kind of the importance of all actors, and that each actor has a very unique role to play, and also kind of to jump in a little bit to Marco's question about the roasting. So I will say that the report doesn't it highlights the different tools and the different methodologies that actors are using, although it doesn't necessarily advocate for one over another. But you will find in the report that there are case studies of what people are doing at the kind of the roasting level to reduce their emissions. And so I think that's one final thing I would say is that that report does highlight what's sort of happening at the office level as well to reduce emissions, and that where there might be some sort of lack of awareness of where we can engage further, right? Such as at the kind of the level of transportation. As Stephanie mentioned, the part of the problem is that it's so different how people move coffee around the world that it can feel really hard to tackle. And I think through tools like the Cool Farm tool and others, and a lot of research that is happening, we're starting to tackle processing and cultivation. And so I hope that that this also moves into some of these other areas where we're seeing gaps in awareness of how to reduce, such as the kind of the level of transportation. So the report does get into all of that. And so definitely what I'm excited about this panel is it kind of is talking about the action that companies are taking, despite the fact that there still is a lot of complexity and maybe information that's still missing and gaps we're trying to fill. But despite not having all of the information, right, we're still learning. There's really important action that is happening. So anyway, yeah, I encourage you to read the report more, but also do take action where you can.
Wonderful. I love those additional comments, and probably elaborating further on the question that I received from the audience from the SCA perspective. I think that you clarified that, but I just want to double check on that. Independent of the tool or the method that you're using, what we would like to endorse and support is, let's say, these principles behind why you are doing this. And I think that in terms of strategies for carbon reduction and the implementation of adaptation and mitigation strategies, it's, if you want to act towards, let's say, a climate or carbon neutrality or carbon negative strategies, the first thing that you will need to do is measure. If you don't measure, it will be hard to create action plans that are verifiable and that can be trusted by your consumers and, let's say, the coffee sector at wide. So I think that that's our position. Whatever you're using in terms of measuring and working and using that information to improve your energy efficiency, I'm pretty sure that we are fully supporting that. And yeah, I don't know, Grace, if we are receiving additional questions. If not, I have many for closing this webinar. Let me see. We have one from Bill. He say, have any of the farm measurement tools determine a methodology for compensating farmers for carbon that they are already sequestering on their existing farms as an additional source of revenue and incentive for them to leave shade trees in place and continue to build soil? So, well, regenerative approach for sure. So I don't know if Cinzia or Nora, if you want to take a stab on that question.
Yeah, I can answer that, and then maybe someone can add. I would say that the farm measurement tools that I'm aware of are able to get a snapshot of the carbon sort of sequestration, the carbon emission scenario on a particular farm. Now, you can use that data to then, sort of compare that data to kind of compensation schemes. And so, of course, there's carbon is a commodity just like coffee. So you can kind of figure out what that's worth on the market. I think this becomes very complicated when you're talking about really, small scale farmers, and understanding that there's a difference in terms of how you compensate carbon stock versus how you compensate carbon flux and year-over-year change. So I think my belief is that we're sort of, as an industry, still trying to figure out how to compensate farmers, whether that's done through the carbon market, whether that's done sort of outside of the carbon market. And for me, it really comes down to each individual's sort of company's approach to how they use the data that they're collecting, and how they want to incentivize, and which actors they want to incentivize. So I know that's kind of a little bit vague, and I don't know if Cinzia, you'd like to add, or one of the companies that's working on incentives, but yeah, go ahead, Pedro.
Wonderful, Pedro. You have your hand raised, so feel free to compliment.
I don't know if Cinzia wants to go first. I just wanted to.
Go for it, Pedro. Don't worry.
I totally agree with Nora. There's a long way to go in this respect, but there are steps moving forward. From our side, as we started in 2021, is to start measuring the forest inventory that we have in our farms, to track sequestration at farms. We need to start knowing the baseline. What trees do we have now? What diversity of trees? What size they are right now? And monitoring them and marking them would allow us to protect them and start protecting literally tree by tree in our farms. There are ways to scale this up. There are approaches in the industry, like the one that is reported, like Acorn from Rabobank, which a strong local partner like Solidaridad in Colombia, and other part like Peru in South America, where they are engaging in this platform on how to scale up the measurement of the green assets at farms, and finding methodologies to compensate the farmers. This approach might not be very impactful, this particular one, in countries in countries in Central America with already robust, long-term established agroforestry systems. So for those areas, we in Caravella, we are doing some conversations with developers that we can kind of extrapolate the methodology for above ground carbon sequestration and try to phase that that enemy or that dark area of soil organic carbon, how to better measure it, how to better track it, how to monitor it, and especially to develop and scale opportunity to do so. So as Nora said, there is a long way to go, but the good thing is that this type of approach and panel can align us in facing those challenges.
Wonderful.
Just briefly, if you don't mind, Andres, talking about soil carbon. All these tools are absolutely amazing. It's great that we have them, and it's great that they're being refined to really be applied to the different types of coffee production, right? Coffee is not produced the same way everywhere in the world, like the panelists have mentioned. The thing is that very often we just look at a snapshot in time about how much carbon is in a specific spot, and that very often is limited to above ground, meaning plants. But at the same time, I think we need to focus more on soil. Soil can sequester carbon for a really long time, especially the portion of carbon that becomes minerally associated. So that is really can stay there for hundreds of years if managed properly. And that brings in the issue of having also to evaluate land management practices from above ground, like do we prune the coffee, do we take away that, or how much biomass are we removing when we remove coffee, because that contains carbon as well, versus like what kind of sustainable soil practices are we employing so that we ensure that carbon, even though obviously cycles through the soil, there's always some respiration coming out from the soil that sends carbon back in the atmosphere, but how much are we sending back in? And you cannot go there 1 year and then the year after and measure a difference in carbon. That's not how it works. So that's one of the main challenges in estimating soil carbon sequestration. It takes a long time, and time that sometimes we don't have, right? So I hope to see better refined algorithms that really effectively tell us how well we're doing in our land. And it's very much needed to really look at long-term projections rather than snapshots in time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cinzia.
If I could just add one last comment on the question of recognizing farmers' ongoing work. Our approach is, of course, everybody's working with somebody on the ground to perform this work. None of us are working directly with the individual smallholder farmers. So we believe that cooperatives are the best position to build capacity in a permanent way and to enable producers to stay on their land long-term, which in itself is already a value. We're also moving away from just accounting and the results of accounting of carbon to associate them to payments because of this long-term need of guaranteeing that the carbon is sequestered for a long period of time in order for it to have an impact. I think that our approach is more focused on understanding, empowering farmer organizations with information on their performance to be able to target their investments and have the most impact at a regional level, rather than focusing on, one bean and, the pruning activity, removing biomass, but rather permanence over time of that farming operation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melissa. Yes, sounds amazing. We need to start to wrap up this conversation. And I know that we have, for closing, we want to share the key takeaways, but I would like to use a question that Nora shared with me earlier before joining to this webinar, because I think it's a very good question. We want to hear from Cinzia what are the key takeaways, but with a hint on, after hearing this coffee company's representative, how the information that they share aligns with the report, particularly in terms of the challenges for the sectors and ways to move forward. And with that, we can close with your additional call to actions on the survey that we just shared in the chat.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we're running out of time, so I'll be brief. We already mentioned how the most pressing needs that emerge from what we heard today, but also from the report, is the need for standardized a verification tool that can be really applied within the industry because it's specific to the industry, but also a tool that allows for a cross-company comparison, which right now that is not available, right? And that would be a necessary tool to really coordinate action, exchange knowledge, and information about best practices. Another thing that emerged, and I'm glad that there was a comment in the chat about, for instance, roasting. Well, there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that we realized from the survey that actors in the coffee industry are taking advantage of, and in particular, like switching to or transitioning to renewable forms of energy, small and big actions like thousands of solar panels on the headquarters of some companies versus changing lights to LED lights, but also roasters in particular, they seem very interested in taking advantage of new technologies that allow for lower carbon emissions. And the industry is still very much a fossil fuel based industry, but things are changing and changing fast. We notice that. And transportation remains an issue, right? This is a commodity that travels across the globe, and a lot of companies feel like they don't have much control over this, how to move away from fossil fuel when it comes to transportation. But there's some movement there too, and that's an area to explore. And then a common challenge, and some of that emerged in this panel today, is the difficulties in assessing scope 3. Scope 3, as Nora mentioned early on, implies all those indirect emissions that are a bit out of the control of individual companies, such as the fossil fuel that goes into producing nitrogen fertilizer that then is applied on the farm, right? And although some companies from the report claim that that might represent even 80% of their total emissions. So assessment tools that account for scope 1, 2, and 3 are very much needed. And then lastly, I think our report achieved its goal to be a call to action. We didn't want to tell you which tools are the best tools, but to simply share ideas, show what we know, and promote further action and communication especially. This is something that a lot of the respondents advocated for, wanted. So this is why we are here. And Andrés, can I pitch for the survey? Can I a little?
Yeah,
you saw
we're closing with that for sure. Yes.
Thank you. We are asking you to, if you haven't done so already, some of you might have, to please take a survey. This is a survey that we included in our report. It's an anonymous survey, and it was targeted to really better understand what actors within the coffee industry do to reduce their carbon emissions, what questions they have, what challenges they face, but also what's their perspective, their unique point of view when it comes to the role that the coffee industry has in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. Like I said, it's anonymous, so no identifiers will be released. And there's also room at the end of this survey to add your comment, your unique perspective or suggestion. Actually, we received some suggestions when we first issued the survey, and we found it extremely useful. So it's in the chat, so you can access the survey by looking at the link in the chat. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And I know that we are over time, but I would like to thanks to all of you, the panelists and the research team for your time today, and to the audience for joining us today. Have a great rest of the day and week. So thank you very much, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.